so this is we have been doing this for several years in a row now, and Ryan and excuse me, it started out uh, as a kind of a webinar uh, during the COVID years, and now it's this has turned into such a neat tool to reach a lot of people. So a lot of folks will not have to travel very much. My name is Gary Gall. I'm a professor and also a fruit specialist and with OSU. I have been working for OSU, gosh, lots of years, and this will be my 31st year. So enjoy working with all folks. Maybe Ryan, you could do an intro of yourself.
Hey, I'm Ryan Slaughter. For anybody new that's on this one that wasn't here last week, I'm the A&R educator of Ross County. I've been doing this job for a couple years now, but prior to that, I worked with Gary down at OSU South Centers in Piketon. Took care of all of our fruit research plots, which included everything from figs to grapes, and we even dabbled in some apple and pear trees. So this is always a fun one to do.
Mhm. All right, thanks, Ryan. And we'll just go into our presentation now, and just a little bit, kind of a shameless self promotion for people who are always looking for useful references. Midwest Home Fruit Production Guide. It's a wonderful reference for everybody. So, folks, and purchase them online from our extension publications office. And this bulletin has been around since, I believe, 2017, and more than 6,000 some copies have been sold. So we made a lot of folks quite happy, and I'm the editor and also one of the co-authors. So it's a great bulletin great reference to have, and yeah, just encourage you to purchase a copy for yourself or for friends and family and all that. Okay, so you have a handy reference, and then over the years, we have created a few a few fact sheets, and so our apple, growing apples in the home orchard has recently been being updated, and so that's a pretty nice fact sheet. And then I looked online, and I was like, boy, because the one that we have, it has some diagrams on how to prune and train apple trees, but it's definitely not as complete as others. I found another one, and by OSU, but it's by Oregon State University, and it's training pruning fruit trees in the home orchard. So the links are here, and so you can Google them. It's a pretty nice fact sheet. So hopefully that will be of some use to you. So we can say that both fact sheets are from OSU. So we keep on going, and apple tree pruning. And this is my buddy Brian Heltzer with Pages Produce in Amanda, Ohio, and I always just love chatting with him about pruning, about fruit growing, apples, peaches, pears, and also more recently grapes. And he's just a wealth of knowledge and a wonderful person to talk to any day. So the just wanted to tell folks that apple pruning should be done every single year, and it's yeah, pruning should be done during year one, and then you keep well, the training should be started in year one, and then should be continuing for the first 5 years or so, and then the pruning will be done every year, and typical time it's March. And I always tell folks, it depends on how many fruit trees that you got. If you have 50 acres, and I would probably start sometime in November because it takes a long time to get it done. And but the ideal time is March. My typical joke is if you just have one tree, maybe you would just prune it either March 1st or right after our pruning session today and prune at night. Ryan, maybe you could give us some common reasons that people wanted to or needed to prune apple trees.
Um, well, there's a few reasons to prune them. Number one, if anybody's ever had a property with an old apple tree that's never had anything done with it, you probably noticed over time that maybe the productivity's declined on it. Maybe you can see some plant health problems showing up. One
Mhm.
couple of the biggest reasons being the productivity, just keeping a fruit tree in production and maximizing the production. Pruning really aids in keeping that at an annual basis. Otherwise, if you're not pruning yearly, sometimes you'll see kind of a boom year and then a bust year where you might have a lot of apples in year one, and year two rolls around, you didn't do anything to the tree, and you're probably not seeing it any as many. So that's one good reason. But just general tree health is another reason to kind of keep that canopy open, keep good airflow through the canopy, and sunlight. Sunlight also is a big uh, positive thing for fruit production, just to mature that fruit and keep the health of it. So those are probably the two biggest positives for annual pruning.
Very, very good, Ryan. And so I always tell people that fruit trees and their main goal is to produce as many fruits as possible, so they can produce a lot of seeds, and so the species and gets to continue on and as part of evolution. So if you gave apple trees or pear trees or peach trees a choice, and their goal is not to produce the best quality fruits, and their goal is to produce as many fruits as possible. So that's why you could imagine that uh, uh, our goal and their goals are quite conflicted. Just a lot of conflicts. But anyways, so the high quality fruit production takes a lot of yeah, a lot of management. So pruning is very, very important. Um,
Gary, the
so
tree in this picture, it's probably 5, 6 years old.
yeah, that's I would say that's about 5 or 6.
Okay, because the
Yeah.
next slide, I just want to kind of point out the reference. People probably are interested. The next slide is going to show some much older trees and what they've been.
uh, so that's good that Ryan. So these the pictures, the trees in this picture and they have actually been pruned over the years, and they're about probably 20, 25 years old. These are they were planted by the farm guys and at the Waterman farm. So even though the one on the left hand side says not pruned, but they have been pruned uh, over the years, just not pruned that year. So annual pruning is very, very important. See that apple trees are typically trained um, in a central leader system. You have your bottom, they call it, we call them scaffold limbs, and you have a gap in between, and then another gap in between, and then you have a few branches on top. So you could partially prune them, that's all good. But completely prune trees, you go like, holy Moses, and that's pretty drastic. Most of us, uh, most of us are kind of a little bit on the uh, I call myself on the wimpy side. We tend to leave too many. So when you look at something like this and you think, well, there's probably not much of anything left, but but the growers will tell you they might still get a bushel or two bushels of apples from this. Anything you wanted to say about this, Ryan?
No, I just think that this is a good picture, just kind of give people an idea of, what a potentially younger tree looks like compared to some relatively old trees. So, and I think we'll talk later about kind of bringing back an older tree into proper structure, but this is kind of a couple good images of what, well-trained trees look like.
Yeah, this is where I go to take a lot of pictures, and these trees are still around, and so uh, okay, here we go. Okay, speaking of Waterman, Waterman Farm, and so the gentleman in the picture, and his name is Mark Schmidtgen, and he is a former farm manager of Waterman Farm at OSU. And then before that, he was a farm manager at our Overlook Farm, and that farm was sold many years ago. I believe back in the 90s. It was sold. Now he and his wife they are owners and manager of a Heartland Orchard in Thornville, Ohio. So I'm going to go through. When you look at go through go through a few slides and to show us how how he prunes them. So these apple trees have been pruned every year, properly pruned every year, and then even now you look at this and say, wow, that's a big jungle. While the while it's just a lot of still have a lot of shoots. I think Ryan, you went there with me, correct? And a
Yeah.
few years ago. So
Hmm.
do you want to say a couple words about this while I drink a little water to cure my cough?
Yeah, sure. So the tree here in this picture, this is prior to any pruning done to it. So when you are in a kind of a commercial setting like this, and Mark, he does a great job. He's done it for a long time. He prunes this whole vineyard all by himself. But one thing that he talks about, he doesn't want to spend too much time on each tree because, well, he's out there all by himself doing acres and acres worth of fruit trees. But again, you could kind of get an idea of the a well-trained tree here in this picture. Just looking at the structure, you've got these tiers of what Gary referred to as scaffold branches. So you can kind of see that bottom and middle, and then that top tier, and then you get into that central leader at the top. And then the next picture that we've got coming up, that's kind of after pruning, really gives you the idea of what that tree should look like. But like we said before, when it comes to pruning, like proper pruning, when you look at it afterwards, you're probably going to think, oh my gosh, did I kill this tree? Because you're taking out so much growth. So yeah, this is the picture I'm referencing it for the structure in that kind of triangle shape.
Yeah. So it just kind of like sh show you before and after and because of a person like me, I still go like, holy Moses, is there anything left, and where would the fruits come from? And see the when you look at this, you see these really nice kind of almost horizontal, horizontal or scaffold limbs, and typically you can have either three or four, depending on how the trees were trained initially. So here, I think I'm seeing maybe one, two, three, and then so from here to the bottom or to the soil surface, and typically we're talking about 24 to 28 inches, and then between scaffolds, and so these see this is your tier one, this is your tier two, between scaffolds, and that's about 24 to 28 inches, and you want to make sure there's nothing, yeah, nothing, grown in this area, and so you can actually get into the tree to do some management practices. And then from the second tier to the top tier, and these are semi-dwarf trees, and so you still have another maybe 24 to 28 inches. Uh, you can see here that scaffold limbs um, are not shading each other. So this area you don't have any scaffold limbs on the bottom, and this one was purposely trained or left to cover this area, so it will not shade the bottom scaffold limbs. So the whole thing is either a triangle or pyramidal shape to capture sunlight. So it's very important to have the tree you know kind of narrow on the top, and then very wide on the bottom. So it's like a satellite dish, kind of capturing sunlight. And then we will well maybe we'll go over from this well trained nice apple tree and to something that's kind of really really something that has not been pruned forever for a long time, or neglected trees, and that's kind of a common. So we get questions like this a lot, and so there are several approaches. Maybe I will ask Ryan to maybe give us a couple pointers, and let me see if I can add some. When you have a neglected tree like this, so what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a pretty common call that I get. People have either bought property or they've had an old apple tree on their place or inherited land, and it's been neglected for a number of years. And so long as the tree's in general good health, you're not seeing a lot of bark chipping or open wounds on the tree and dead limbs. Generally speaking, you can kind of bring it back into productivity. However, in trees like this, hard cuts or hard pruning should really be done over a course of a few different years. So ideally, you wouldn't do it all in one year. Number one, that's pretty extreme to do something to a tree like that. Removing a bunch of wood and then vegetative growth can potentially be shocking to the tree. And it also opens up a lot of wounds. So, ideally, and that's why we do our pruning this time of year, is because we're really going into when the tree's starting to wake up. And that kind of maximizes the speed in which those wounds heal over. So if you're taking out small branches, those heal over pretty quickly. But oftentimes in these neglected trees, you're going to have pretty big branches, pretty big diameter branches that you're going to need to remove just to reduce a bunch of that shading. So breaking those large pruning cuts up over the course of 2, 3, 4 years, depending on how bad the tree is, minimizes how many of those large wounds that tree is trying to close up. So, and I think this tree, looking at it, probably at one time had been pruned properly. It looks like it's got some lower scaffold branches and some mid-tier branches, but it's just been allowed to um, just kind of grow wild. So I think in that next picture, we can probably see that's probably your first year pruning, and you can really tell a big difference there. How much it's been opened up. You can kind of see a little bit blurry, but you can see some lighter spots, which were probably relatively large diameter branches that were removed so that, anyway, just to bring some more sunlight into that canopy. And then over the next couple of years, a little bit more and a little bit more could be pulled out of there.
Yeah, very very good, Ryan. And so as you can tell, uh, what I typically do is I would maybe mark like somewhere between six to nine really large limbs, and uh, and then I would remove three, three each year. So by the third year, the tree should be back to somewhat of a good shape. And then over the years, I have also kind of recommended maybe a couple of things. Maybe first when you deal with these kind of situation, you could either ask yourself or ask the person on the other end of the phone, like, hey, how well do you like growing apple trees? Because there's no guarantee the tree will be kind of brought back to a highly productive shape. A typical lifespan, uh, the typical lifespan of of an apple tree is about 20 to 25 years. So commercial growers routinely just push them over and then start with new trees. So so my question for the person is how serious or how excited are you about growing apple trees? I would say I would probably plant some disease resistant variety apple trees and dwarf apple trees uh, in a different area, and while I train a large and neglected tree. And if you assuming that you really enjoy growing apples, and there are a lot of people who do, a lot of people who do. And so after 3 years or so, and then your neglected tree uh, might be kind of brought back to shape, and if not, your young apple trees will be will already be in pretty good shape. So it's good to kind of be prepared and for for all things, and then after 3 years, and if that neglected tree still looks awful, and then maybe I'll ask Ryan to come in to come here with a basil with a chainsaw and cut it off at the at the base. and and then the apple trees do make excellent firewood. So while your young apple trees are in pretty good shape, and just kind of uh, since we talk about neglected trees and maybe just some basics and of apple growing or how apples behave. So so apple trees they produce fruits on these compressed stems. They're called spurs. So there are there are several types. You have your regular type, which will produce fruits uh, on spurs. There are also spur types, which will which produce produce a whole lot more spurs, and so that's these are the mutations. And there are also columnar type apples and apple trees, and they're kind of the extreme version of spur types. And so we today we're just kind of focusing on the common types. Uh, maybe put Ryan to work and then just uh, this is kind of a showing flower buds and leaf buds.
Yeah, so the picture there, the two branches that you see, the one on the right, you can see has a pretty small buds going up the stem, and those are simply leaf buds. And then the one on the right would be a fruiting branch with the fruiting spurs that are a little bit longer, you can see. So as you're pruning, you can really kind of um, oftentimes you'll see what are called water sprouts, and we'll probably talk about that later. But those are just those upright shoots that grow straight off of the main limbs on the apple tree, and those are oftentimes just vegetative. So most of the time you're removing all of those because you want fruiting spurs. So this is one good way of being able to tell the difference between two different types of limbs on the tree.
Okay, yeah, keep on going and just other examples of here uh, the spurs and all that, and so you have when you once you prune them off, and what would happen to these stems. See the each when you look at a flower bud, each one of them can produce a lot of fruits, and then people might get excited, like, "Oh, this is fantastic!" And I'm getting that many apples. But the problem is, so you have one, one, two, three, four, five, six here, and uh, and then if you let all of them mature, you are going to end up with a bunch of small kind of small sour fruits. And growers typically refer to the one in the middle as king fruit. And so I always joke with people, like, if you are a guy, that's king fruit, and if you're a lady, that's queen fruit. So typical fruit thinning, and you actually don't want all of them to mature. And so if you do it by hand, I would remove all five and just leave the king fruit or queen fruit in the middle. And so that fruit will produce um, will turn into a very high quality, very good tasting fruit versus getting like six small sour fruit, and nobody wants that. And then when you make these cuts, and these are just kind of illustrations, like uh, how you should cut a stem. And so do not cut it too closely. If you whack off at the base, and then that will present a large wound, and that could potentially cause canker, and so the branch will be damaged in the afterwards. So it's good to leave a little bit of a collar, so the area will be able to heal very well over time. And see, this is kind of another picture of a cut. And uh, so so when you think about the type of branches and branch angles to leave, and we always talk about maybe like 60 to 80-degree angle. So the branches, and when they go out, then it's your or when you have them at the 60 to 80-degree angle, and then you'll have some growth and you will have some fruit production. So you have kind of more balanced growth, uh, balanced approach between vegetative growth and also reproductive growth. So here is just a nice white branch angle, and so when you train your scaffold limbs, and you kind of get them to be nice and wide, and so you can support, well, you can produce a very strong structure that can support all those other branches for fruit production. And this is kind of a fuzzy picture, and maybe Ryan can talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, this is a painful picture, but I see this quite a lot, especially if you're driving down the road next to any power lines. You probably noticed that there are these tree services that top these trees, and this is pretty typical regrowth. When you see a tree that's been topped, you'll have all these real small, spindly, upright shoots, and um, just really is not good for the health of the tree. Anytime you see a topped tree like this, first of all, those were huge cuts made all at once. So you kind of open that tree up to try to heal those very large diameter cuts made to the top of the tree. And then second, you've got all those small, tiny, spindly shoots, which creates a huge, massive amount of vegetative growth, all those leaves which shade. So anytime you see something like this, whether it's even in not outside of fruit trees, but even just in your maybe your deciduous trees in your yard. This is not a recommended practice in pruning.
So kind of right on, and you see a lot of even when the trees are properly pruned, you see a lot of water sprouts. Water sprouts like this, and they go straight, straight up, and just apple trees have a tremendous root system. So whenever you make a huge cut, and then you will get a huge response, especially with mature trees. And see a lot of these water sprouts had to be taken out, all those vertical shoots. And first of all, those vertical shoots are not going to be productive because they will grow a lot of leaves. And then even when they do produce fruits, and fruits will be very soft for for backyard growers. It's not as awful because you're not talking about growing them for a living, but um, for commercial growers, and they want these fruits to be to be potentially stored for a month or two, and so the soft apples do not last very long. So, anyways, and so these the first things that go are the vertical water sprouts. I think I had. Oh, okay. Had the reference thing twice, but here there is a book for people who really like training and pruning apples and pear trees. This book is quite old, and it goes back to my graduate school years. And actually, it was probably even before. Maybe it was during my college years when this book was first published. And you can still find them on Amazon, and it just has a lot of great diagrams. So uh, I remember when I purchased it, it was very expensive. Maybe half of my pay went into that one book. It's still expensive. So so we will. So we'll talk about a few things, pruning tools and type of pruning cuts, maybe training system, young apple trees, and bearing fruit bearing trees. And we already talked about the neglected trees. And then if we have time, we can talk about the slender spindle. We may not have that much time, but anyway, just in case Ryan and I we run out of things to say, and which never happened. uh, Ryan already talked about this, and let's see. Do you want to see if you missed anything, Ryan?
Yeah, I guess I didn't mention, this is also a good opportunity, especially if you got some of those neglected trees that any damaged or broken limbs, oftentimes if we go through a pretty rough winter, whether it's cold temperatures or especially if we get any sort of ice accumulation on limbs, you might see some damage coming into the season, broken limbs, or especially if you got deer in your area, they could be, um, rubbing during the winter times, and you'll see some damage there where they've damaged the bark. So this is also a good opportunity to remove any uh, injured or dead limbs.
Okay, all right. We'll keep on going, and I love collecting tools. Ryan is the one who did all the work, and I also always have the nice shiny new tools in my car because I he's the one who worked in the field. Anyways, so when you select these tools, yeah, depending on there are some preferences and for with apple pruning, typically you need a lopper. Yeah, you need a lopper, and you also need a hand pruner, and a lopper will probably do maybe 60%, 60 to 70% of the job. And then hand pruner will probably do like 10, 15, 20. And then once in a while you will need a nice pruning, yeah, pruning saw. And gosh, yeah, you definitely want these uh, tools. Many years ago, well, you can see that these are Falco brands, and I bought some cheap ones, and boy, they were cheap for a reason. These Falco pruners are really fantastic. Anything to add, Ryan?
Yeah. Um, you know, number one quality, like Gary said, I've done the same thing, picked up some pruners for less than $10 at the hardware store, and they might last for a season. So some really good quality pruners. Felco is not the only brand. I know Corona makes some really good ones. ARS is another company that's very good quality. Baco is another one that makes some really nice ergonomic hand pruners. Because one of the big concerns with if you're doing a lot of hand pruning, there's some potential risk for carpal tunnel, but that's if you're doing a bunch. But like Gary said, with these larger trees, most of the work's going to be done with those hand loppers. And there's some really nice folding hand saws like that one up in the top left. They're a little bit more compact. You can stick them in your back pocket, and those are really nice to keep one hand as well.
Ryan, yeah, well, Ryan was
You
working
mentioned
at our.
too, these are considered those hand ones are considered bypass pruners. I see, and I still see them a lot. These anvil pruners, which essentially instead of the blades passing against each other and making the cut, the top blade uh, comes down in contact with a just a flat surface or an anvil. Um, it's best to have these bypass pruners. They make a cleaner cut. The problem with the anvil pruners, oftentimes they'll crush the stem on the bottom and you won't get a good, healthy, clean cut. So it's just a kind of these bypass really mitigate any potential damage that can be done to the limbs when you're cutting them.
And also, these blades are replaceable. So so instead of just getting you know purchase purchasing brand new ones, so you could purchase just a new blades and then replace them, because very often you might hit the wire with with this really fancy pruners, and then you kind of damage your pruner, and which never happened to me because mine are rarely used. But anyways, so the blades can be replaced. And there are also battery powered pruners, and they kind of scare me pretty good. So we'll let other people kind of take these kind of risks. So this is so definition of pruning. It's nothing really more than just a removal of the part of a tree. So when you look at this and when you say pruning, you're removing any part of the plant, and whether it's a branch or shoot or a single spur. So pruning by itself is not that complicated. And then yeah, there are two main types of cuts, and so this diagram is a little bit fuzzy. It's I believe if I found this in either in one of our fact sheets or bulletins, um, may have come they may have come from Dr. Dave Free, who used to be our state pomologist or tree fruit specialist. See the heading back cut is when you only cut part of the branch off. So, for example, you could just remove like maybe top 1/3, and then that's called the heading back cut, or you remove uh, portion of the stem from here, and so that's called heading back cut. Whenever you make a heading back cut, you tend to encourage encourage branch formation and also redirect growth. And so the heading back cut is used quite often on the terminal shoots, so you kind of guide your growth. And then second, so it's a second cut is called thinning out cut. It's a removal of a shoot or branch at its junction with a large branch or a trunk. So as this picture diagram shows, and you come here, you would cut it completely off, and you do want to leave a little collar. So the thinning cut is when you want to open up the tree, so to let more sunlight come through. So water sprouts and typically are completely cut off via thinning cuts, and then terminal terminals of the scaffold limbs are typically pruned back or headed back. So the growers sometimes kind of talk to themselves and like, okay, I don't like this branch, and uh, there are history and via pruning, yeah, we're thinning cuts. Okay, let's test the memory a little bit, and let's see if Ryan still remembers anything from this slide. And go ahead.
Mm. Yeah, sure. So
Uh,
this just shows you a couple of different, responses that the tree is going to have. Obviously, in the picture on the left or the diagram on the left, that would be your dormant shoot with your buds all along it. And as you can see in the middle picture, left unpruned, all of those terminal buds on the end of the branch are going to open up and respond and then shoot new shoots. And then in the example where Gary's talking about heading back cuts, you can see that this is really good when you're wanting sort of to change the direction of either a scaffold branch or some other branches. You can choose a cut to make a cut. Say you wanted to have this branch go off to the right or left or up or down. You can make that decision by cutting just beyond whatever bud you want to make the direction change to. And then the plant's going to respond in that next growing season where it's going to push those buds just below where you made that heading cut.
so by making a heading back cut, you will drastically increase the branch angles. So, for example, like this, and this is a much wider branch angle. You can then bend it to even make it even to make it even wider. And so the unpruned trees will grow like this, which is not ideal. It's perfect for the tree. Well, it may not even be perfect for the tree. Just these narrow crash angles will cause the branches to split. So a good example would be the Calvary pears. Just during Hurricane Ike, a lot of trees were toppled over, and then some of those trees they lose half of the tree. So now the Calvary pears are labeled as invasive trees, and so that's actually a good thing. Okay, so the when you look at a dormant tree, and then you have you make a few pruning cut, and see you have too many here, you would cut off this and cut off this, and uh, you have a bunch of you a bunch of new shoots come out, and then if you don't prune them, and the tree will be heavily shading each other. And then if you make a few make a few thinning cut. For example, this one was cut off, and so you create a pretty nice space here, and then a pretty nice space around here. So you have a much better light interception. So the thinning cuts are always essential as part of the training uh, tree training process. And typical training system for apples and pears. We're talking about a central leader system. So whenever you look at this and you go like, okay, I wanted to make my tree look like what's in the diagram. Maybe Ryan can talk a little bit, and while I drink a little bit of water.
Yeah, so if you can think back all the way to the beginning of the presentation, we had some really good live examples of a central leader system that sort of in that triangular shape, but with one central leader, just referencing the trunk that leads all the way up through the center of that plant. And then you build those fruiting branches off of that central leader. So Gary mentioned apples and pears are best managed under this type of pruning system. We'll talk about open center or vase later on in the peach talk, and that lends itself more towards some other fruiting trees as well. But with apples and pear, this is really the kind of the most natural way to maintain these, and it's going to make them the most productive under this system.
As you can see here, you have a trunk, and then you still prune it to kind of develop a central leader, and then these are your scaffold limbs. And typically, you would have four, four in each direction, and sometimes it's okay to have three as long as you have a good distribution. So you have that kind of a pyramidal, conical type shape. Uh, well, the little bit about the training. So the training is you are kind of guiding the framework, well, guiding the development of the structural framework, and for example, apple trees don't really naturally grow into a central leader. It would just kind of grow into a big tall tree with with lots of stems and kind of a big thick ornamental tree versus a fruiting tree. So so you do need to prune them to train them into a specific shape. And then there are many reasons, and both academic reasons and practical reasons. So uh, to make the story short, you want the trees to produce high quality fruit year after year for about 20 to 25 years. So this is what the central leader system looks like. You have your trunk, your central leader, your scaffold limbs. Our good old friend Mark Schmidtgen. And with a central leader system, and typically you have your, uh, I think I kind of talk about this a little bit, and you have your first whorl, and that's about 24 to 28 inches above ground, above the soil surface line, and then you have about 18 to 24 inches here, and then sometimes you have a second whorl. Typically, it's a second, and then you would that's the end. For home fruit growers, you probably want. I would highly encourage you to think about growing dwarf trees, and sometimes folks would want to kind of grow semi-dwarf trees, but semi-dwarf trees can get pretty big, so it would be a lot of work to prune and also train and to spray and if you have to use a ladder, and that's pretty scary. So that's when I sent Ryan up there to do the work. I used to. Uh, so let's maybe talk about training a little bit, Ryan.
Yeah. So this is another one of the calls I always get. They've had an apple tree that they planted that's been 3, 4, 5 years, and then I get the call, how should I prune this? So, well, I say, how old is it? And say, well, ideally you start pruning fruit trees in year one, right after you plant it. And again, just to kind of reiterate, after pruning older trees or vines or whatever, you think, gosh, am I going to kill this thing? But it's kind of scary when you get a new tree, and really, it's the pruning's super easy in the first season, just making that cut on that central leader above buds that look good and healthy, so that it encourages that first set of scaffold branches. So as you can see there in that picture to the left, that cut being made, and then on the picture on the right, you can see it being just above a bud. And then what that does is it encourages all that lateral growth underneath of that. And then that from the next season, then you can select from those the best ones to become that first whorl or first tier of scaffold branches. So it seems kind of extreme, but this is what's going to set you up for having a good structure in the future on your trees.
Yeah, so it's kind of counterintuitive, but that's something you have to do. And I agree with Ryan. It's kind of a scary thing, like holy Moses, and what did I do to my tree? So after you make that cut, and then you will see a few little branches coming out, and one, two, three, four, and then from the top, and this is you see four kind of like bicycle wheels, and see these little spokes, and anyways, and so and all those little branches, and once you see them, and then if you have too many, you could just remove them, and then you train about four as your scaffold limbs, and then you also select one as your central leader. So uh, so you look at this, and okay, so A is your central leaders. It's actually good to have the central leader to go a little bit sideways. Eventually, it will turn vertical. To go a little bit zigzag, and that will actually slow down the growth, and then make the tree kind of go into fruit production earlier. So even though you think you kind of want the central leader to be completely vertical, and you do not, that branch A goes a little bit sideways, and eventually they will go straight, and then you remove B and C, and then you train your these four. So I think I have a picture. So to train them, maybe Ryan, you can talk about this.
Yeah. So if you can think back at that picture, the little diagram of removing those two competing, what could potentially be competing central leaders being B and C, and then we get down to those four limbs that you left on the main trunk. Gary talked a bit about branch angle off of the main trunk. Ideally we're looking for a 60-degree angle somewhere in there, just because that's a stronger angle. Eventually, these are going to be your big main scaffold branches. They're going to eventually grow into 4, 6, 8-inch diameter limbs, and you want that crotch angle to be pretty wide. So in the beginning, this is the easiest way to set it up, is just simply because these limbs are very pliable at this age. And just by simply putting some clothespin, or you can even hang little weights I've seen on those branches just to get the angle of that branch down. Otherwise, oftentimes the natural tendency is for those limbs to want to grow vertical, like Gary mentioned on the central leader. But if you can get those early young limbs to kind of lay down, that's going to set it up for a good angle in the future.
I was just looking at my clock, and boy, how time flies. So if you purchase a kind of more of a 2 3 year old tree, and then you would want to you can work with that too, and they did some of the training already, and you can reduce the central leader, and then you can also shorten all these branches, to train the future. So this is what they look like. You're heading back and cut, and heading back all the laterals, so or future scaffold limbs, and so they will not compete uh, with the main central leader. And then sometimes what Ryan and I we learned this from Dr. John Strand, and so if you have what if you want a branch where you uh, don't have a bud, and sometimes what do not have a branch, you can cut the notch right above a bud to force that bud to come out and to turn into into a new branch. So and then your branches are then once you pin them to a kind of a 90-degree angle, and then you can cut them back about 1/3. So this is what these clothespins look like, and they force these little young shoots to go horizontally, and then eventually they will come back a little bit. And so this is what they look like, and really nice wide angles, and then they come up. So your combined branch angle is about maybe 60 to 80 degrees. And then once uh, after August, you can remove those. Now you see the tree is in a really beautiful shape, beautiful shape. And then afterwards, and you would make a few more cuts. So this is what the nice and well trained apple tree looks like. And so I'm just going through some of our slides a little bit quicker. And so when the branches are getting much larger, so folks will growers use a lot of spreaders. So you can purchase the plastic ones or metal ones online, and you can make these spreaders yourself. So to force the branches to go at a much wider angle. So hopefully by the fourth year, and your tree will be pretty good shape. Let's see. And so a few when you have fruit producing fruit well the fruit bearing years, and how do you prune those? How do you prune those? So I always tell folks and just kind of think about it like this. Whenever you have these really upright shoots, and upright shoots and on the back of the tree limbs, they will still produce fruits, but the fruits will be soft and poorly colored because they will be uh, because the branches are too vigorous. And then the drooping ones, and the vertical ones, and they go. So when I prune, and a lot of times I'll talk to myself like, I don't like this, and vertical ones go. And then the drooping ones, the ones that are pendulum and droop downward, and they will still produce fruits, um, but because the branch is too weak, and uh, also the fruits will be shaded, so the quality will be awful. So this will be too soft, and this fruits and will be too sour. So the ones that are more like horizontal, kind of growing sideways and on the branches, those are the best. Those are the best. They have moderate vigor, and they are fruitful, and they're also exposed to sunlight, and so they will produce fruits, high quality fruits, uh, with superior color. Anything you want to add, Ryan? We're kind of getting close toward the end.
Yeah, I think that if we finish up with the next two slides, that would probably be good just to talk about proper pruning cuts um, for the health of the plant.
Okay. So go ahead. Do you want to
Yeah,
say a couple words about this?
yeah. So I think this is a really good kind of diagrams of proper pruning cuts, especially on some of these smaller limbs. You know, we talked a lot about pruning above buds, just to either change the direction or forcing branching. So you can see in the two on the right, the one on the far right, we've left quite a bit of a stub above that node or where that bud is. Oftentimes, maybe that's an inch long or longer before it gets to the next bud. Oftentimes, that stub will not heal over correctly and rot, and then that could potentially create some issues there with boring insects, where it could die back into that node or where that bud is. The same thing being with the diagram in the middle. That cut, even though it's been cut at a nice angle there, um, it's been cut too close to that bud. So it's a lot more potential for that bud as that cutting wound is drying out and healing over for that bud to die. So, ideally we would leave a little bit of space between our pruning cut, which should be made at an angle, roughly 45 degrees, maybe a quarter to half an inch away from that bud, but not too close, not too far away. Excuse me.
Yeah, whenever you have that kind of a slanted cut away from the bud, because water will not accumulate on top, will just slide off, and then that's a much better cut. Let's see. So, and then here, Ryan wants to see this, and what when you make cuts on the larger branches, and some of I have done this myself, and you are having fun cutting, and all of a sudden, this if you just make a notch here, and then all of a sudden the whole thing will just kind of come off, and then you strip a huge bark off, and you go like, oh, what did I do? So it's more important to make three different cuts, and you make a cut underneath a little notch, and then you make your second cut, and cut this off, and then once you once you once you make your second cut, and this comes off, and then you make your third cut above the branch collar, and so the branch collar will be able to heal. So to kind of summarize, and pruning and training, uh, uh, apple trees. So when you think about the bearing tree, just anything vertical, you can cut them off. Anything that's uh, points downward and straight downward, and those branches can be cut off. And then anything that kind of goes sideways and horizontally sideways, you keep those. And then if you do that, and you probably still end up with still too many shoots, and then you go like, okay, which one should I sacrifice? And then it's more about kind of the tree architecture. So so you you would uh, so you would kind of like, okay, have one branch here and next branch there, and kind of just alternate and zigzag, so all the branches are spread or distributed evenly on the main scaffold limb. And one another thing to remember is when you have fruits on apple trees, each fruits should be kind of spaced about 6 to 8 inches from each other. And so when you leave those spurs, so you can have one spur here and then another spur here, 6 to 8, even 10 inches, and then uh, you have them spaced far apart. Remember that you still have 5 or 6 fruits per spur, so you still have a lot of fruits left, and so hardly, I don't think anybody ever kind of regrets leaving leaving during the growing season. Hardly anybody regrets for leaving, too, what's the what's the right word now? Too few or too many? Yeah, I'd say too few. You always leave too many.